That's right. We finally did it, boys. Finally here with the No Blue Line Show. Braden Darnell coming at you. No Blue Line Show finally gets recorded. We finally get the job done. Episode 1 here. We're going to do a little bit of a fall recap, a spring preview of the ECRHA. We're going to do a big preview on the ECRHA Interregional coming up this weekend at HotShots. But first, I want to let you guys know, I know a lot of you guys follow me on Twitter. You guys know that I do work for the ECRHA. I write their recap articles, write news articles, do stuff with them. I also do stuff with Coast to Coast. I do stuff with Kevin. We got a great group of guys that work with us at Coast to Coast. Bobby Leitris, Holst, a couple great guys. We got a handful of great guys over there. They do a lot of work. I know some of you guys have been looking for Coast to Coast stuff more this year. We're working on it. Like I told you guys about this podcast, we're working on it. I mean, it's tough. It's a lot tougher than some of you guys might really understand. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. I'm just, being honest with you here. It's a lot tougher than some of you guys think, lining up schedules from guys all across the country and getting stuff out to you guys. But, enough of that. I digress. First episode, No Blue Line Show. Like I said, D1, D2, D3, D4 recaps of the ECRHA fall coming into the spring. Preview the Interregional. We're getting right into it right now. All right, so let's get rolling here. We're going to start, this first episode going to be pretty quick, pretty short and sweet, but I really wanted to recap how the fall went in the ECRHA. I wanted to preview a very big interregional contest coming up this weekend. Going to have a lot of D1 and D3 teams in action from the east, from the southeast, from the Midwest, Great Plains, all coming over. Lindenwood's coming to HotShots in Mount Pleasant. Got all the ECRHA teams in D1 and D3 participating, and it's a big gateway. The ECRHA always holds their Interregional in January, which to kick off the spring, which I think is a great idea because it helps, one, get those middle-of-the-road teams, get their legs back under them, get them ready for the playoff push, and it also lets the top teams, such as a Farmingdale or a Lindenwood or a Newman, really come out and showcase that. Or not only can they get their legs under them, but they also can see what they've got against other top teams across play. I know your top teams are typically playing in regionals, and it also, as you guys know, helps with those national bids. But first, before we get into that, we're going to go into some fall recaps, division by division, and we're going to start with D2. D2 is something that's real close to my heart, something I played in all 4 years when I was at Penn State, and something that I think is arguably one of the most competitive, probably is arguably the most competitive division in the NCRHA because of the amount of teams. And I know I'm probably going to put on blast for this. D1's the most competitive. Well, D1 greatly competitive. There's so many talented players that play professionally, internationally, et cetera, in D1. But in D2, you've got a lot of solid schools that, and by a lot, I mean a lot of solid schools that across the board I think is definitely the most competitive. But on the East, if we take a look at the standings, it's not really to anyone's surprise. Northeastern, top of the list, undefeated. They do have one overtime loss. That overtime loss is to, I'm sorry, I'm pulling this up real quick here. Overtime loss to Stony Brook. Now, Stony Brook's a team that I didn't really hear a lot going into the season on how they are expected to do. I know they every year form a real solid team, and that is that one blemish on Northeastern's record. But right now, it looks like Northeastern is pretty much cruising through D2. They've got 53 goals for, 23 goals against. They're scoring. And they're possessing the puck. There's one thing that really separates good D2 teams, and that's when they can play a good roller hockey system. I mean, in D2, you'll see a lot of teams that are doing well in standings, but when it comes down to it, in March and in April in regionals and national championships, those high-scoring, high-paced teams, they might make it into bracket play at nationals. They might make it pretty far in their regional division or their regional championships, but it's the teams that really play like D1 programs or like professional programs. They play slow, they play methodic, they play system hockey. That's the ones that you're going to see winning championships, and that's something that Northeastern does. And a lot of teams that, you've got teams such as Endicott with their star player Corey Eisenbrand. They do play a system game, but a lot of their scoring relies on Corey. And that's why you see Endicott kind of in the middle of the field. I mean, there's a log jam there, but they're sitting at 7-2-2. Right now, they're 5th in the standings. They're making regionals, probably making nationals, but Northeastern's just cream of the crop right now. Now, under Northeastern, like I said, we've got a log jam. You've got 6 teams really underneath Northeastern that can really make some noise coming into the spring. It all comes down to how they open up the spring, how they play those first couple games, because once we get into the spring, you're looking at, you've got 6, 7, 8 games left in the year, and every game matters. These games in the early spring, these are the ones that matter towards if you're going to make regionals or not, if you're going to get that nationals bid or not. And teams that you can look at throughout that, one that really pops out is RIT. RIT Tigers, this is a team that they were D4 last year, played really well, got bumped up. They got bumped up to D2, and, they didn't really – I didn't necessarily have high expectations for them. I knew that they had players like Samuel Murphy coming back – or Samuel Murray, coming back. I knew that they could score goals, but I just didn't know – I didn't know how they would match up against those good D2 teams that are returning a lot of guys, like a Northeastern, like a Penn State, like a Yeshiva, Oswego, who made that miracle run last year at regionals, and ended up coming a little bit short, not only at regionals, but kind of underwhelming at nationals as well. But they really had a solid group coming back, Jack DeFellis and his brother. But RIT just really impressing. They're 9-3 right now. They have an amazing goals for. Like I said, this RIT team can score goals, and this is one of those teams, like I mentioned earlier, they play a really fast game. And that fast game is going to get you wins. I mean, right now, like I said, sitting at 9-3, they're getting some big wins under their belt. If they keep playing it the way that they're playing, they're going to make enough wins to make it into regionals, which pretty much at this rate, kind of looking over the teams and looking over nationally, if you make regionals in the ECRHA, there's a pretty good chance that you're getting a nationals bid. And at the very, very minimum, you're getting an alternate bid. And RIT right now is well on their way of doing that, and they're well on the way of making nationals in their first year in D2, which is an awesome achievement. Also, right under Northeastern, my alma mater per se is Penn State. Now, this is a team, when I first joined Penn State, it was their year after, kind of taking a year off, and then that was when we came back. We came back in D2. They've been in D2 ever since, coming from 2012 up until now. And a team that I can speak from the inside on this, every year has high expectations. There's great talent that comes out to their tryouts every year. The lack of a practice facility really hinders their ability to improve and better themselves throughout the year. But right now, at the end of the fall semester, they're sitting at 10-2. They only have 2 losses. Now, something to say about their 2 losses is that those 2 losses came against teams that, I don't know, necessarily I think, and I know talking to a couple guys over at Penn State, such as their captain Tyler Murphy, Coach Russ Loring, their 2 losses, one came at the hands of RIT, that D4 program. That was in Harrisburg, 6-3, which really was a close game back and forth. But like I said, RIT is one of those teams that can fly up and down the rank, and they're a team that's going to score a lot of goals. And Penn State defense has been an issue for them. Defense has been an issue for them the past couple of years, and it continues to be this year. I mean, they're scoring goals, but at the same rate, they're giving up goals on their own. And their other loss came to Oswego, and I don't know what it is. I wouldn't necessarily say that Penn State and Oswego is a rivalry matchup per se, but I can speak on behalf. I mean, I feel comfortable speaking on behalf of a lot of people that play for Penn State and have played for Penn State, myself included, that for some reason that Penn State and Oswego matchup is always close. It doesn't matter if one of those teams is at the bottom and one's at the top or in the middle. It doesn't matter where they are in the standings. That Penn State and Oswego matchup is always going to be a close match. And, they lost that one by 1. And Oswego's still a very competitive team. They're sitting at one game under 500. Outside looking in right now, but I'll tell you, that's a team and that's a school that really prepares for the spring and can come back, upset some teams above them, and sneak their way into regionals. But, previewing the spring, I mean, like I said, this first couple weekends, they're really telling on how D2 shapes up for regionals. And for me personally, I see Northeastern staying up top. I think they're they're a big, solid group of guys. And when I'm talking big, I mean, typically you'll have some short, shifty guys here and there on each team, but Northeastern is just a big, solid squad. And when it comes down to that physicality, once you reach the playoffs, once you reach regionals, whistles aren't getting blown so much. You're coming into the boards hard. Northeastern's a team that can win those battles in the corners and then control the pace of play from there. And, D2, I mean, it's a crapshoot. You've got a bunch of high-scoring teams, and you've got some teams that are kind of underachieving as far as, I think, Oswego, Syracuse coming up from D4 back to D2, where they were a couple years ago. I think they had higher hopes coming into the year, but the year's not over. Like I said, you come out hot in the spring, you win 4 or 5 games in the spring, and your whole season could be turned around. You could be from the outside looking in to you could be sitting at a 4 or 5 seed coming into regionals, get a matchup that you might like. Next thing you know, you might be sitting in the regional championship. So D2, spring is going to be really exciting for D2. I'm not saying that out of bias. I'm not saying that of this or that. But D2, really, if you guys want to watch some really competitive games, I think D2 is going to be where those competitive games are throughout the rest of the year. Moving forward, I mean, we'll go to D4 just because these two, D2 and D4, have the biggest breaks. They're not playing this weekend, but they will be playing in the weeks ahead. But they're not playing at the Interregional this year, which is a little bit disappointing, but I can understand with the way that the ECRHA is having their Interregional this year. The D1 and D3 teams, there's so many teams attending this year, which is a great thing to see, that it would be impossible to have all 4 divisions and have as many teams as they would like for all 4 divisions at that Interregional. But in D4, and this has been kind of the story the past couple years, you'll get 2, maybe 3 teams that are just putting up numbers against the weaker teams, just absolutely destroying other teams. And then those 2, 3, 4 teams then kind of battle it out at regionals for that regional championship. I mean, you guys know there's no national championship for D4, so what these guys are playing for is regionals. And, what's fun about D4, watching it, talking to people that have played it, is you won't get some of the more skilled guys playing in this division. You'll have some guys that are really skilled, and they just happen to go to a school that has a D4 program, and they'll play, and, that'll really help their team. But you get guys that might not be necessarily as skilled, but you get guys that really love and care about the game, and that's what you get in D4. I mean, I know Niagara's had a couple guys like that. Niagara's held a program for so long, and they were competitive last year in D4, but they've just been really underwhelming win-wise, but every time you talk to those guys, they just love the sport, and that's something that, is really valuable, and you can really care about and appreciate. But looking at D4 standings right now, Millersville, they're led by Charlie Yoder, one of the greatest minds in roller hockey, and it's really shown since their program formed, and it continues to show this year. Right now, they're undefeated, 74 goals for in 7 games. They're averaging over 10 goals a game. They are just putting teams in the dirt. And right now, St. Joseph's from New York isn't far behind them. They're sitting at 5-1. They've given up the least amount of goals of the teams that have played 6 or 7 games. I know that Hofstra has given up less, but they're also not scoring nearly as much. St. Joseph's is right behind them. Their only loss is to that Millersville team. And I think, looking at it right now, you could get a good matchup or a good game, I think, in maybe in the regular season between a Cornell or a Hofstra, between St. Joe's and Millersville. But I think that this D4 is just Millersville and St. Joseph's championship to lose. I think you're going to see them in the final. I think you're going to see them continue to cruise. Excuse me. Continue to cruise, beat the lower teams in the standings. I think they're teams that are going to win the games they need to win, and they're probably not going to lose that many games going forward. And I think you end up seeing these guys in the final of the regional championship. I think that's just how it is. And, we'll have a couple episodes in the future. What we're going to try to do is at least an episode a week, but, that could change. Maybe an episode on game weeks, episode after game weeks. We're not sure looking forward, but going to do the best that we can to get quality podcast, quality news out there to you guys, opinions, previews, guests, what have you. But, that's how D4, I think Millersville, St. Joe's, those are teams you're going to need to be familiar with if you're looking at the D4. Moving ahead, man. I feel like this episode's cruising by. First episode, we're working out the kinks, trying to figure out what sounds good, put good quality out. So, we might have a few hiccups here and there, but hopefully, depending on how it's received, hopefully you guys appreciate it. Appreciate the content coming, appreciate the news, et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to move on to D3. D3's, I'll tell you, D3 right now, when you look at the standings, you look at the teams at the top, you're not surprised. Right now, the Farmingdale Rams have two teams in the top two. You've got their Farmingdale Green team, which came last year, won regionals handedly. They didn't have any competition last year. This year they come back with two teams, and now it seems as though Farmingdale Green's only somewhat competition is the other Farmingdale team. Farmingdale Green, they've got the leading points scorer, Bobby Leitris. He's at 49 points, and he's followed behind by his teammate and someone that he goes to school with, in James Kolakathis with 39, 10 points behind him. These guys, it's no secret that kids from Long Island or kids, if you're playing roller hockey on Long Island, it's a hotbed. And Farmingdale proves that day in, day out, every single game. Right now, Farmingdale Green, and this is just absurd, but if you're looking at the standings right now, Farmingdale Green is sitting at 10-0, as expected. They've only given up 13 goals against right now, which, you can laugh. You can laugh when I say this, but I think might even be a little disappointing to the guys at Farmingdale. I know Daniel, the Farmingdale Green goalie, last year, I think it was, without looking at it, I think he gave up 14 goals all year last year, regular season and regionals. I'm not positive on that, but it was somewhat close to that. And I think right now, with half of a season ahead, already giving up 13, I think that might be something they're actually disappointed in, which is kind of absurd to think about, that they're giving up just over a goal a game. And, they could be disappointed at that. And on the flip side of that, they've scored 111 goals in 10 games. That's over 10 goals a game. How are you going to possibly tell me that any team other than Farmingdale is going to win the D3 ECRHA regionals? I just don't see how that's possible. Now, Farmingdale Black, they're not as strong offensively, but in comparison, no one's as strong offensively as that top Farmingdale team. Something I really wanted to touch on here in D3 is some disappointing teams. And, whenever you're playing against teams as strong as those two Farmingdale teams, it's hard to talk about disappointing teams or what have you, because you're playing so many of your games against teams and you're coming in as the underdog. But teams like Northeastern, or teams like Slippery Rock, Northeastern, for example, they're 2-6 right now. They've given up 68 goals in 8 games. They're almost giving up 10 goals a game. And something that from, a brain on the game instead of, necessarily skill on the game, is someone that from the outside looking in, what can Northeastern or Slippery Rock do to kind of right the ship, kind of gain some momentum, win some games, and get some confidence going in towards the spring push? And something that I think is really helpful is if you just kind of step back and slow down the game. Or even something that's also really helpful is when you're in the stands in between your games, hanging out with the boys or whatever, don't sit and just watch games and look for those highlight plays. Don't look for those guys. Don't look for Bobby Leitris to go end-to-end after he's been playing D1 and he comes down and plays D3, because their D1 team's just as is dominant. And don't look for those highlight plays. Don't look for someone going bar down. Don't look for someone dancing around all 4 defenders. Sit down and look and see how they play the game. Why are they getting so many scoring opportunities, and why are they demolishing teams as bad as they are? And I'm not just telling them to watch other D3 games. You can watch D1, D2, whoever. But if you sit down and watch competitive hockey games and see what's making these teams win, whether it's their breakout, whether it's their power play, whether it's their speed, whether it's their communication, just take mental notes in your head, and that's going to help you improve. And really, I'm not saying each team needs to find a videographer and take film of their games or whatever, but watching the game is just as important as playing it if you're looking to right the ship, because I'm not necessarily saying for mimicking teams or copying a play style, because some teams just don't have the skill set to mimic a play style, or they don't have the wherewithal to mimic a play style. But if you sit down and take little notice of what other players are doing or what other teams as units are doing, you're going to improve. You're going to give up less goals, and I can't say that you'll score more goals, but giving up less is half the battle. And, the cliche defense wins championships, when in roll hockey, what it comes down to is possession. Don't turn over the puck, because if you turn the puck over, it's most likely going to end up in the back of your net, and you're going to have to start all over again. But, that's how I think teams, D3, pretty straightforward to me, similar to D4. I think Farmingdale comes out on top of this, but like I said, this is an early preview, and we'll see how it pans out. And from there, we're gonna move on to the nitty gritty. We're rocking and rolling, we're running amok. I think we're about 20 minutes in, but we're already on to D1, and D1's a tough division, man. D1 is an absolute tough division. Now, D1, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to go from the bottom up, and I'm going to run through every team, what I see standing-wise, what I've seen personally-wise, conversationally, what's going on in each team's mind, what they can do to try to get a better look, get their spring a little better than their fall was, or maintain momentum heading into the spring. But Rhode Island's a tough team, and they lost a lot of talent. They're 0-8-1 right now. Only 18 goals for in 9 games. They're averaging 2 goals for a game, which, as many of you know, isn't going to cut it in roller hockey. You have to score in roller hockey, and not only are they only scoring 2 goals a game, but they're giving up almost 10 a game. And like I kind of mentioned with that D3 talking about the lower teams there, Rhode Island, what they really need to do is just possess the puck, stop forcing turnovers, stop forcing plays, because what you're doing is you're just giving the other team scoring opportunities with no blue line. And that's, no shameless plug or anything for the No Blue Line show, but with no blue line roller hockey, teams can score and make plays from anywhere, and that's just what they're going to do if you give them the puck. Rowan, I wouldn't say they're in a similar boat as Rhode Island, but I'd group them with Robert Morris, Temple, and UMass, as all 4 of these teams are, seemingly they're on the outside looking in, as they're not that far behind Cortland, but I could even throw Cortland in this group, but this group of teams, and I will, Cortland, UMass, Temple, Robert Morris, and Rowan, these are all teams that I think are in a second tier of D1, and how do they get out of that tier? Well, they have to win the games that they should win, statistically speaking and talent speaking. They need to beat Rowan when they play them. They need to beat Rhode Island when they play them. And if they want to make noise come the end of spring, they need to beat the teams that are in this kind of second tier of D1. For example, you're looking at Robert Morris, who's 2-7-1 right now. They've had some really close games against Westchester and Slippery Rock. Really close games. And those are 2 top programs in D1 right now. And so you can't sit here and tell me, I know Robert Morris is playing without Dan Trunk, which is a huge hurt. Granted, one player doesn't make a team, but a player like Dan Trunk, who is a quarterback, a mastermind, a student of the game compared to a lot of his teammates, and he really helps his teammates as a player / coach / manager / trainer / whoever. someone like him just makes such a difference. And if Robert Morris, had him, although he has that surgically repaired knee, their season could be totally different. But right now, they don't. I mean, the fact that, you could talk ifs, shoulda, coulda, woulda, ifs, ands, and buts, but Robert Morris doesn't have their best player, and they need to make the best out of it. I mean, I'm hearing some scuttlebutt. He might be able to play if they make nationals. He might not. I mean, if I were to talk to Dan, and I have on occasion, not very often, but if I were to talk to him, I mean, I would say, you got to be careful with that. I mean, a knee injury, especially when it takes you out for a full year, is coming back for just that run worth it, or just give it the summer, but nevertheless, kind of off topic there. But teams like Robert Morris, teams like Cortland, teams like UMass, they need to win the games that they should, because if they win the games that they should, not only is it going to put them in a better place in the standings, but it's going to give them that confidence and momentum, because if you come in to a game against a Slippery Rock or against a Newman or against a Westchester, and you've won 3 or 4 in a row, and I'm not talking 3 or 4 in a row against like a Rhode Island where you're just doing whatever you want with the puck, putting it where you want it. You've got guys open no matter what you're doing just because their defense is so lackluster. If you win 3 or 4 in a row against the teams that you're competing with in games, those close games, those games that other teams, while they're waiting for their game to come up, they come to the stands and watch those games because there's noise going on in those games. It's high scoring. It's exciting. There's physicality. If you're winning those games and then you come up against a team in that upper echelon of D1, you're going to have that confidence. And that's so much to do with roller hockey. Is not only about your skills and your mindset, but also confidence. I mean, if you come into a game, and I know this was an issue in the past with playing a Farmingdale or a Newman, you come into a game and you're thinking, well, it's Farmingdale or it's Newman or it's Lindenwood or it's Bethel or, UNLV even for a while. We don't have a chance. And because what we play or what, the players now play is a club sport, I guess I wouldn't say that's acceptable because I don't think that it is at all, but I think it's almost okay for people to think, oh, we don't have a chance, so why exert ourselves for it? Well, you do have a chance because every single game matters, and not only do wins and losses matter, but quality of games matter. I'll tell you right now that the national committee looking at these national bids aren't just looking at your wins and losses. They're looking at games that you competed in games that were close, in games that had a couple things go your way. I mean, this isn't the BCS. This isn't the college football playoff. A lot of things go into consideration because these are people that have played the game and know a lot about the game looking at you guys. So come out, give your effort for the entire spring, and be committed to your team because you don't know what could happen. You really, really don't know what could happen. And that's really how I feel with that middle of the pack because I think, I think there could be 1 or 2 teams there that come out this spring and say, hey, enough of the bullshit. Enough of the messing around. We're going to come out, we're going to win these games, and we're going to make some noise. And I think there's quite possibly, I think that totally that Cortland and UMass particularly have the team talent overall to do that. And I also think that with guys like the Grillo, with guys like Ralph Grillo at Temple, I think they also have the opportunity to do that. But I do think that Cortland and UMass, of that group of second-tier D1 teams, are the most likely to do so. But I'd be pleasantly surprised if I was wrong in that and every single one of them came out competitive, because the more competitive teams you have, the better it is for the sport, the better it is for the school going forward, and you as a whole on the season. And now we're going to get into the fun part. Fun part is the upper echelon D1 ECRHA. Little homerism here, but I know, you can't argue about Lindenwood, can't argue about Michigan State, can't argue about even Grand Valley State, who actually is also coming to HotShots this weekend for that interregional. Can't argue with the quality of those programs, but little homerism, the ECRHA D1 is awesome. Been watching it, 5-6 years now, and it's always, the upper teams are always competitive. I don't know if it's because we're from the East Coast. We get guys from Philly, Long Island, whoever. We all like to talk. We all like to chirp a little bit. It's just, it adds so much to the game that adds excitement. It's not just a hockey game. It's an experience. And that's what we get in D1. I mean, right now, you've got Farmingdale, who, to no surprise for many, I think, top of D1, 11-0, averaging 10 goals a game with 110 goals for so far, only 21 against. Dustin's playing well in net for them, and the scary thing about Farmingdale is that they haven't played a single game with their full team yet. I mean, maybe I could be wrong on that. They might have played one weekend with their full squad, but as far as I know, they haven't played a full weekend with their full team. And they're practicing together, so it's not as if that's jeopardizing them. I don't think that's hurting them. I think that's only helping them in the sense is that, this isn't the NHL, this isn't college football, it is roller hockey, but injuries and stuff happen. I mean, you see that with Trunk and Robert Morris. I mean, stuff happens. And if you're saving guys in roller hockey, that's even better for your team, especially with a team like Farmingdale, who they know it's their, at least regionally, it's their championship to lose. And I think nationally they have the confidence that it's their they're the defending national champions, and I think they know that that's also theirs to lose. I mean, they've got PJ DiMartino, they've got Little DiMartino now, and I'm hearing some scuttlebutt, and I don't know if it's official or not, but you might have heard it here first, you might have heard it here before, but they've got a transfer. They have a transfer in the spring. And, I don't know, some of you might have heard this name before, some of you might not, but the name's Tyler Kraft. Tyler Kraft from Newman, official this spring. He's playing this weekend for Farmingdale, has transferred from Newman to Farmingdale. And how do you argue that Farmingdale doesn't defend their championship now? I mean, they have, with just PJ and Tyler, they have, I would say, two of at least the top 10. I would venture to say even maybe top 5. Two of the top 5 players in the nation right now of all ages at one school. I mean, college-wise, how do you compete with that? I don't know how you compete with that. And not only skill-wise are they there, but Farmingdale plays fast. And when you play fast, when you have teams like that or players like that, it's hard to find competition. Now, moving down the list, you go to Westchester. Westchester right now, 8-1. And what Westchester has that I think is unique about Westchester is they have goaltending that I don't. Now, don't get me wrong, Farmingdale has this in Dustin as well. But what Westchester has, I think that others don't, is goaltending that isn't just good, but is absolutely phenomenal. And that's their goaltender, John Whitman. John is a huge specimen. I couldn't tell you. I mean, this is only from watching him, and I don't know John, and don't mean to insult his intelligence or his height, but John is a big guy. I mean, he's looking at him in net. I mean, I know I would be intimidated because not only is he big and, maybe 6'2", 6'3", but he can move and he can cover the entire net. I mean, you really have to try your ass off to get the puck behind this guy. And that's something that I think sets Westchester apart. And I think that's something that puts Westchester above the teams that they're above in the standings right now. I mean, they have guys like Derek Hoffman that can put points on the board. But when it comes down to it, John Whitman can keep you in games and can win you games, and he did that at regionals last year, and I don't see why it would be any different this year. I think Westchester's a team that if anyone is going to put Farmingdale down, I think Westchester, at least in the East, is the one to do it, and it's going to be on the back of John Whitman, because if he has one of those games where he just stops everything he can see, then they're going to win the game because they also have that firepower from guys like Hoffman and stuff like that they can score goals, but they also have fantastic goaltending behind them. Moving on, you've got Newman, who is right now they're 7-1-2, and I'll be honest with you guys, they're going to get beat by a lot of teams in the spring, I think. First of all, I think they're going to be very disappointed with their showing this weekend. We'll get into that later at the Interregional at HotShots. But if these rumors and this scuttlebutt that I'm hearing is true about Tyler Kraft going to Farmingdale, you just lost one of the best players in the world at college rugby. Don't get me wrong, Newman has talent with Strophe and, in net with Gaggio, and you've also got Sean Phelan and Max Halverson putting goals up. And don't get me wrong, Newman is still a class act when it comes to playing the game, but I think that when it comes down to it, I think the loss of Tyler's going to hurt way more than people might think. And I think they're going to lose games to teams like Slippery Rock. They're definitely, I think, going to lose their games to Westchester and Farmingdale now. I don't think that the rivalry I should correct myself. I think there's still going to be a very physical verbal rivalry between Farmingdale and Newman. But because of that transfer from Tyler and as well as PJ's transfer, last year, and I still think it's going to be chippy and verbal and probably close. But competition-wise, I just don't think they match up, and that's so weird for me to say, but I don't think they match up with a team like Farmingdale or come this weekend when they're playing Lindenwood. I just don't think it's going to be a competition. They're great. They're a great team, but I don't see it. And this is where it's a little disappointing for me that, I'm kind of doing this first episode solo. I don't have someone else in my ear to have this conversation with and to kind of put points against what I'm saying or maybe even back me up and agree with me. But, Newman's a big question mark for me now. I don't last year I predicted, when they would get eliminated at Nationals, and this year, one of my last great memories with Ian was that I texted him right after round robin at Nationals, and I said, Newman's not making it to the Final Four this year. They're just not. And that's what happened, and we laughed about it, and we laughed about how good of a prediction it was. And, that was a great memory that I have. But anyway, not to get all sappy or anything, but I just don't know if Newman's got it anymore, man. I see the loss of Tyler. I see their losses in the last couple years, and I wouldn't say it's a rebuilding stage because they still have great players, like I said, with Strophe and Halverson and Phelan and Gaggio and net. But they're going to lose some games, I think, and I think we're going to see that in the spring. I think we're going to see that as early as this weekend. And I think the wild card, and I feel so awkward and uncomfortable kind of bringing this up because as I'm sitting here in my home in Slippery Rock, I'm bringing up how I think Slippery Rock is going to be a good team and going to turn some heads when it comes to regionals and nationals. And I think if you know me at all and you know my roller hockey history at all, particularly in college, you would know that I would never tell you that I have any favoritism towards Slippery Rock and Slippery Rock guys. I know you might give me hate for that, but, I played Slippery Rock my first 2 years at Penn State. I played with and against a lot of guys in the summer, and no favoritism. I have a lot of respect for their program because I know how small of a basis Slippery Rock has, especially with competing universities around such as Pitt and Robert Morris and Duquesne. There's a lot of good roller hockey in Pittsburgh, but in regards to Long Island and Philly, I don't think it matches up. And the fact that Slippery Rock can not only maintain a program, granted they took a year off last year, but maintain not only a program, but a competitive D1 program is absolutely amazing to me. But they're my wild card. I mean, right now, they're sitting in the standings at 6-2-1. They've lost some games that I don't think they should have lost. They have a really young group of guys, and one guy that really pops out to me, his name's Dustin Davis. He's really young, first year in playing in the ECRHA, and this dude's got skills. I mean, I've known this kid since he was a kid. I mean, since he was 10 years old, and he was good then. He's good now, and that seems to be a theme in roller hockey. You know, if you got the skills, it's going to carry you in roller hockey, and that's no joke about this kid. I mean, Dustin, as well as a couple of their other players like Gazella and Scott, they can put the puck where they want to, and that's really going to be beneficial. Not only that, they've got speed, and they've got pretty decent goaltending as well. They've got their goaltender, Ian Freyer, who can stop. He can make the stops that you need him to make. And really that's what you need to be competitive in any division, is if you have a goalie that can make the stops that he should make, you're going to be competitive. And this Slippery Rock team, I'm telling you guys right now that this Slippery Rock team is going to make some noise. I'll get into it in my preview of this weekend as well, but I don't think just in this interregional. I think they're going to make some noise, maybe even on the way to regionals and into nationals. The only thing holding the Slippery Rock team back, and it's kind of been a popular trend with them, I'm good buddies with one of their former players, Adam Salvaggio, and, they've had guys like Christian Scott, and, I don't think these guys are going to take offense to when I say this, but Slippery Rock has always had an issue with penalties, and taking penalties, losing their cool, getting in scuffles, running amok, causing a stir. And I think that's still going to remain true with this team because they're so young. But if they can stay out of the box, stay disciplined, stay to their system, stay using their speed, this is a team that I have no question that I think is going to beat Newman at least one more time this year. But I definitely can see them stealing a game from Westchester. And, it may be when it comes down to it, maybe Farmingdale's resting some guys, or maybe even with a full team. I don't know. I'm not willing to make that stretch yet. But they can compete with a Farmingdale if they play perfectly and if everything lines up for them. So, just don't sleep on them, man. I mean, these top four teams in Newman, Farmingdale, Westchester, and Slippery Rock, I don't see them going away. I don't see teams replacing them in the East. I don't see teams getting above them in the East. I only see, for 3 out of the 4 teams, I only see them getting better, and that's how I think it's going to be coming into this weekend. And they're going to have some great tests this weekend, and we're going to get into that right now. And we're back. The No Blue Line Show coming right back at you. Coming back at you with the final segment of the show today, the preview of the ECRHA Interregional event at HotShots, Scottdale, Pennsylvania, home of the Inferno. And this this Interregional, I think, is going to be the best Interregional of the year. And I don't think there's a question to it. I've got 9 games that I think are going to be big focal points in Division 1. No Division 3 preview, just for the sake of, I think that your big look is going to be Lindenwood and Farmingdale Green, and there's not much more, I think, really to discuss about it. I mean, I think those are the teams that you want to keep a lookout for in D3. I think those are the teams that you're going to see, as long as they don't see each other in one half of the bracket. I think those are the teams that you're going to see in the final of D3 Nationals, and so I just didn't feel really the need to preview the Interregional for that. I mean, I'm going to cover D3 in future shows, but for the Interregional sake, not tonight. But D1, I got 9 games that I think are very important for both teams involved, things that we can see from both games, and we'll go from there. I mean, first, you've got 2 great kickoff games that are starting off the weekend. You've got Farmingdale, Michigan State, starting off on one half of HotShots, you've got Westchester Lindenwood on the other half. For Farmingdale, Michigan State, I think Michigan State might come out of this game really hot. I think they want to prove a point. I think they know, Farmingdale, if they know before going into the weekend that Farmingdale is going to have Kraft, I think they're going to want to say, hey, guess what? We don't care that you have Tyler Kraft now. We don't care that you're the defending national championships. We want to national champions, we want to come out, we want to prove a point, and we want to tell you that and show you that we're better than you are, and that you're going to need more than Tyler Kraft to win back-to-back. And on Farmingdale's side, it's their first real test outside of these. It's their first real test at all, really. And what they really need to do is come out on the weekend, come out against Michigan State, and not have those travel legs. I mean, they're playing on Saturday morning, 9 a.m., I can only assume they're going to be traveling Friday, which is about a 6 hour travel day after class. Maybe they might not take class, might not go to class, but in any case, I digress. In any case, I think they're going to come out, and what they really need to do is just, if I can't speak for Michigan State. I haven't seen them play, and coming into this podcast, I haven't really talked to anyone about how they've played recently. But if Farmingdale wants to make a statement, they're going to come out against Michigan State and say, hey, look, you're not competition to us. And I think that's something that's quite possible that they might do. But I also see the flip side of it is that with those long travel days and with Michigan State kind of having a chip on their shoulder, I think this is going to be a really competitive game. And then on the other side of the floor, you've got Westchester and Lindenwood. You've got Lindenwood who's saying, hey, don't forget about us. I know all the talks about Farmingdale. I know all the talks about what's going on in the East. But guess what? We're Lindenwood, and we're still here. And I think you've got Westchester who, isn't going to forget that. But I think also you've got Westchester who's going to see Lindenwood in the black and gold across from them and not be intimidated by them. And I think that's what's going to make this game competitive. Like I said in my recap and preview of the spring for the East, I think Whitman can keep Westchester in games against teams like Lindenwood, but it's a matter of if Westchester has the depth to compete with teams like Lindenwood. I know that, Westchester does have a solid group of guys, solid core, but depth could be an issue for them in games like this. And, their first weekend against their first game this weekend against Lindenwood isn't going to be a joke, and it's really going to put them to the test. And I think that's something that's really going to be interesting. And, what's really cool about these interregional matchups is that not only you're not getting, a few good games in a weekend against really good competitive teams. You're not getting a few of them in the weekend that are, 3-4 hours spread out. But you're getting them consistently throughout the entire weekend, and that's no joke here, as right after the Westchester-Lindenwood game, you've got Bethel coming in, and they're coming up against Slippery Rock. And, if I could only assume, I would assume that Bethel isn't going to really know much about this Slippery Rock team. They might take them a little bit lightly. I know that, Bethel isn't as crazy impressive as they were 2-3 years ago, but they're still obviously a really great team. They're really playing Lindenwood well this year, and I think this is going to be a game that, my wild card team, Slippery Rock, they might be able to make their first statement in the spring and their first statement to the NCRHA to say, hey, you better watch us because we're gonna do some work this spring, and we're gonna do some work, and we're gonna come out and we're gonna beat Bethel, and we're gonna keep going, and we're gonna keep rolling throughout the weekend. And I think that's something they can easily do. Bethel, on the other hand, I think what Bethel really wants to do is, and I think that's the case with Bethel, Michigan State, and pretty much any of the other teams, Florida Gulf Coast and Grand Valley, and pretty much every team, I think, a mindset that might pop into a few guys' heads is, all right, we're going to the ECRHA. everyone's talking about the ECRHA because Farmingdale's won the national championship, and you hear all this talk about the ECRHA, and we're going in there, we're going to shut them up, we're going to hit them in the mouth, and we're going to put pucks behind them, and we're going to win these games. And I think that's something that Bethel's really going to have on their mind. I don't think Bethel's a team that's going to overlook an opponent, and I think that they're going to come in and not take Slippery Rock lightly. They're going to come out and they're going to play their game, and they're going to play well. And that's what you get when you get these Division I interregionals, is you don't get teams that typically play down to their opponents. So you're going to get good competitive games throughout. After that, at 11 o'clock on the same rink, you've got Newman and Grand Valley. Grand Valley, who's playing really well this year. Newman, who is probably going to be on their heels a little bit, maybe, possibly. And you got Grand Valley, who's playing really well going into this game. Their losses have only come to Michigan State this year. They lost to Michigan State most recently in November in their last game of the fall, 2-5. They got shut out against them 0-4. They got blown out in West Bloomfield, 9-0 by Michigan State. So Grand Valley's a team that they're great. I don't think they match up that well against Michigan State, but I think Grand Valley wins this game, and the reason I say that is because I think Grand Valley is a team that doesn't get the respect or doesn't get they're not really a shining lustery team like a Farmingdale, like a Lindenwood, or like a Newman, and they're just a team that comes out and they win games. And Newman's a team that I think is going to be reeling, and I think they're going to have to really adjust their play style without Tyler, without Kraft. And I think it's a game that Grand Valley can easily come out and win as long as they play consistently and like they should, even after a long travel day, even after the winter break. An interesting game to me. And I talked about those second-tier group of teams in the East when I did my Division I kind of recap and preview. And one of the games, I did a lot of games that were top teams playing other top teams to see how they match up, see how the different conferences match up. But I have this game in here to talk about, and that game is Robert Morris and Western Michigan. Now, Robert Morris, like I said before, they're reeling without Dan Trunk. They're 2-7-1. They're really not playing that well, really at all. I mean, they struggle to score goals. I have a good friend who plays for Robert Morris. He might actually join the podcast here in the near future. But he even says, he says we struggle to score goals, and that's why we can't stay competitive. And we just don't have the offensive firepower to hang with some of these top teams. And Western Michigan's pretty much a story of the same, really. I mean, their only wins this year have come against Eastern Michigan, who Eastern Michigan is just not strong, in my opinion, this year, pretty much at all. I mean, I think one score really shows that, and that's that's Western Michigan, beating Eastern Michigan 22-2 in West Bloomfield, 22 goals for, and that's kind of doing the quick math, looking at their schedule right now. If you add up all of their goals for the regular season without that game, I think that game has more goals than they've scored in every other game combined. And their other win is against Eastern Michigan 7-5. So that second game was a little bit closer. But these are two teams that might be right next to each other when it comes to nationals bids. And I'm hearing some scuttlebutt that there's just enough teams in D1 for everyone to make it. But if that's not the case and they change a cutoff or they figure something out and not everyone's making it, then these are two teams that could be on the bubble for nationals. And this game could really tell a lot about, one, not only nationals, but two, how their spring in general is going to pan out. I mean, whoever wins this game then obviously has more difficult games ahead of them on the weekend and in their regular season, but it could be that win and that confidence that pushes one of these kind of second-tier D1 teams into that competition for, a fifth or a fourth place standing spot. If you're talking about the East or Western Michigan, who's pushing them into that conversation with, maybe they'll be able to compete in a game with Grand Valley. Maybe they'll be able to somewhat compete in a game against Michigan State. You don't know, but if they get this win under their belt, it might help them in that regard. After that, I mean, it's kind of a circle, I think, between the top East teams playing some visiting teams. What I've got Westchester and Bethel. Like I said, I don't know that much. I'm not that familiar because of kind of the breaks that I've taken this year with the other conferences, and that's why I'd like to get some guests on here. If you're interested in being a guest, you can hit me up on Twitter at C2C_Durnell. Or reach out to me at an email on here. It's the No Blue Line Show at gmail.com. Let me know you're interested. I know I have some interest from a tweet a while back, but just to kind of refresh that, let me know, particularly for guys out of the ECRHA, because I know I've got some great guys, players, coaches, alumni, people like that are interested from the East. But if you're from the outside of the East, you want to add some perspective, let me know. We'll get you on, because I want to try to make this as consistent and as regular as possible. And if we can get 5 shows in a week, one covering each conference, I mean, that's the goal there, and we're not nowhere close to getting there. But anyway, I digress. Going into Westchester Bethel, like I was saying before, I kind of went off on that tangent about kind of plugging, trying to get more guys in on the show. I don't know much about Bethel. I know a decent amount to a lot about Westchester, and I know enough to the fact that I think Westchester wins this game. I think Westchester's strong. I think they're fast. I think they can score goals, and like I've said before, I mean, I think it might be getting a little annoying at this point. I think John Whitman is the real deal, and I think that he can stop any shot that Bethel throws at him. Maybe let in 1 or 2. I see Westchester probably winning this game by a score of, maybe 4-2, 5-2, maybe a 5-3 game. It's going to be a close game, but I think Westchester pulls it out. And then I believe this game is Sunday morning. Looking over at the schedule here. Where is it? Oh, no, it's actually Saturday evening. Saturday at 6 o'clock. We've got Lindenwood Farmingdale, the match that I think the stands are going to be packed for everyone that's at HotShots. And, with no disappointment, I think this is going to be a great game, especially if the, talk about Tyler coming to Farmingdale is true. I think this game is going to be fast. I think it's going to be a physical game. I think, with the way that things ended last year with Farmingdale winning the D1 National Championship, I think we might get even a little bit more of a rivalry feel to it. Even though these teams don't meet a lot in the year, these are two teams that want to say, hey, I'm the best team in the country, and you shouldn't be on the same floor as me. And I think that's two attitudes that a lot of players on these teams have, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if you want to be the best, you have to think that you are and go out there and prove it and feel like other players shouldn't be competing with you because they're not worthy of it. And I think this game's going to just be, I mean, without hesitation and to no surprise, I think it's going to be the best game of the weekend. And, I think without looking back, and, I hate not having the research in front of me, and I don't want to take the time away to do it, but I think this might have happened last year as well if these two teams met, or maybe this was a couple years ago with Newman and Lindenwood. But I think Lindenwood wins this game, and that might be a surprise to a couple people in the East. Might piss some people in Farmingdale off. I don't know. But I think Lindenwood wins this game, and I think it comes down to penalties. I think that Farmingdale has a feisty group of guys, and I think that showed at regionals last year against Newman in the semis. But I think it comes down to penalties, and I think Lindenwood just capitalizes. But that's just a prediction. That's not. I'll be honest. I don't think Lindenwood matches up with Farmingdale this year as well as they have in the past. Although Lindenwood is Lindenwood, they're a great team. I'm not saying that. Don't put words in my mouth. But I think they win this game. I think Farmingdale's a little disappointed and pissed off from it. But I think in the end, on Farmingdale's aspect, so that you guys don't get pissed at me, I think it's going to help them get that loss under their belt, get a little fire under them to finish the regular season, go into regionals, and go into nationals and say, look, that's not happening again. And then I got 2 more games. They're kind of similar stories as to what we've talked about. Westchester, Michigan State. Michigan State's a team that can score goals, as I've told you guys. Westchester's a team that can stop goals. I think this is going to be kind of a chess match, especially if Michigan State comes out and, I think win or lose to Farmingdale, I think they're going to have kind of the same mindset, and that's that they're going to really want to win this game against Westchester. Whether they win against Farmingdale and say, okay, we're going to beat the second-place team now and prove that the East Coast doesn't mean anything to us, or if they lose, then they're going to say, hey, we've got to right this ship. We've got to prove that we're no pushover, and they're going to come out firing. And you know what? I think this is going to be a really underrated game. This game is going to get played Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. In HotShots, and they're going to have a full day of games behind them. They're going to get some good rest in the hotel, and they're going to come up, and there's not going to be travel legs anymore. I think it's going to be really competitive. I think it's going to be a game that I think if you're at HotShots, you're going to want to watch this game because I think it's really going to impress you, and you're really going to stop and think, I wonder if this is going to be the Lindenwood Farmingdale show this year, or if maybe these 2 teams have a chance to make some noise and make a nice playoff push come regionals, come nationals time. And the last game, I think it's only right with the way that I've been talking about it, this podcast. But the last game that I want to spotlight is Lindenwood SRU. I think depending on how the Farmingdale-Lindenwood game plays out, Lindenwood, if they lose to Farmingdale, is going to come out, I think, and bust their balls to beat the piss out of Slippery Rock, which is quite possible. I mean, I think very possible. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened at all. I think if they beat Farmingdale, they might look past Slippery Rock a little bit and look a little bit more towards their bus ride home and kind of look past Slippery Rock, and it might give Slippery Rock a little bit of an opportunity to stay competitive in the game. But this is, I've said it a couple of times now, the wild card game that I was talking about, or the wild card team I was talking about in Slippery Rock, and they have a chance to really prove themselves this weekend, and that's with their games against Bethel. They also have a game against Grand Valley that I didn't talk about, which could easily have been added in, but I felt a little bit weird putting every Slippery Rock game in the podcast preview. I just wanted to spotlight a few. And then they've got the game on Sunday afternoon against Lindenwood where they can kind of say, hey, we're here, we're back, and we're taking names. But, that's going to do it. First episode of the podcast took me longer than expected to kind of get into the groove, and kind of doing it solo on the first time was a little bit weird, I'll be honest. Definitely going to do a recap after the Interregional. As long as this one goes smoothly, the upload goes smoothly, and if you guys are listening to it, then it did. And get your guys' feedback on what you did like, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see improve. Gonna try to do a little bit more on the background and video side instead of just having the stationary logo, even though I do love this logo. I think that my man on Twitter at CartoonReady91, I think he did a fantastic job with the logo. I love it. But I want to get a little bit more, whether it's, interviews, whether it's game footage, whether it's some motions, some animations, whatever. Want to do a little bit more with that, but what I really wanted to do was get out some content to you guys before this Interregional, because I loved playing. I played in one Interregional. I played at Penn State, and it was the last time D2 was at HotShots. And we played East Carolina at Stony Brook, and I think we might have played East Carolina twice. But playing Interregionals is just so fun to me because you play 18 games in a year on your schedule. You play the same teams, and you create some rivalries, which is fun. But getting that breath of fresh air and that kind of sense of relief where you're playing for something because you're playing to have your team look better to the national committee, but you're also playing and your games aren't do or die, and you meet up with some guys that maybe some guys that went to college somewhere else, maybe play with some guys in the summer that you don't normally see or talk to throughout the bulk of your college year or your season. Get to meet up with them, hang with them. Interregionals are so fun, so I wanted to get this preview out there. Go to Spring Recap, Double Dose, preview, recap out there too. But like I said, that's going to do it for the first episode. I really appreciate you guys watching, or appreciate you guys listening. No video here, just a podcast, strictly audio. But appreciate you guys listening. Look for an episode next week, and I want to thank you. Don't forget to send me your feedback on Twitter at C2C_Journell. Thanks to Cartoon Ready for the logo. Thanks for Bazanju with the intro and outro music, and we're out of here.